The devil has come to Pennsylvania.
So, I just watched that new Conjuring movie, The Last Rites, which is directed by Michael Chavis, who directed that god-awful piece of shit film, The Curse of La Llorona? La Llorona? Who fucking cares? The only thing memorable about that film was Tuco Salamanca playing a fucking agent of Christ. God damn.
Tight, yeah!
Conjuring The Last Rites serves as a final entry in the extremely popular horror film franchise, I think? Maybe? I mean, it even has last in its title. Come on, guys. Or at least, it serves as the final chapter for both Ed and Lorraine Warren, who still continues to be the best part about these films. After the exit of James Wan as the director, you can feel that there's really a presence missing, or like the magic that made the first two Conjuring films equal parts scary and memorable. This film is based loosely on the Smurl hauntings during the 1980s. The film opens with Ed and Lorraine Warren investigating a haunted mirror in a curiosity shop, which both characters are being played by younger actors, which, in my opinion, I think did a very good job with the material. Lorraine then interacts with the mirror and has a horrifying vision of a demonic entity associated with her unborn child. She collapses, goes into labor, and gives birth to a stillborn daughter. Through Lorraine's prayers, the baby, named Judy, is revived. Power of Christ, I tell you what. The car sequence in the film, where Ed rushes Lorraine into the hospital, kinda reminded me of the Batmobile sequence in The Batman, not gonna lie. I have mixed feelings about the intro. The tension and worry about losing the baby never crossed my mind, since I know that Judy is going to survive and grows up to be tormented by Annabelle and Valak. But it does put into perspective why the Warrens are so protective about their daughter. It gives us context why Lorraine rushes into her home after Bathsheba threatens Judy in the first Conjuring film, because she nearly loses her at the moment after she was born, and it also sets up the emotional stakes in the third act, which I will get into later. Half of this film is your standard haunted house plot bullshit. A family moves into a house in Pennsylvania, which in this case the Smurl family, which for the love of God, I can't even name a single member in that family, but they are a subject to a real life haunting or a hoax, whichever side are you on the conflict. The daughter gets an antique mirror, which I don't fucking get. Who gives a fucking broken mirrors as a gift? If I were able to receive a cracked mirror as a gift, I would have just sent that shit back, return to sender. I'm here to inherit ill-gotten wealth, not curses. And soon after, supernatural disturbances begins, crashings, visions, hauntings, the whole fucking package. Now time to get back to the Warrens. The script gave them a very interesting conflict that actually hits hard for me, while the execution can be a little bit better because, like in every film in this series, they're being a little bit sidelined. You're going to hear a lot of this word from me, sideline. Drink whenever you hear the word sideline. They have largely retired because of Ed's failing health and burden of past cases. Their daughter Judy has psychic sensitivities or visions. Ed is aging in this film. He's physically weaker and suffering health problems. Thanks to that little shit in the third film where he makes Ed have an instantaneous heart attack, which I swear the demon must have a social media or a group chat, because the demon in this film does the exact same thing, the exact same move. He struggles between wanting to protect his family and knowing he's no longer capable. His mortality is front and center, making him vulnerable in ways he hasn't been before. The script gives Ed a more exit energy than the proactive energy. He's, say the word with me, sideline, but more of an observer than driver of events. This makes sense thematically, but undercuts his agency as a lead. Patrick Wilson grounds the role with a quiet gravitas. He makes you feel Ed's exhaustion, and when he does act, the weight of his limitation adds realism. Wilson brings warmth and sorrow, even when the writing leaves him reactive. Lorraine is emotionally scarred by the stillbirth in the opening prologue, the mirror visions, and the cost of a life spent battling evil. She carries guilt, fear for her family, and pressure to stay spiritually strong. Lorraine gets the heaviest emotional beats, visions, faith struggles, maternal instincts. The film leans on her to carry the gravitas. Sometimes it veers into melodrama, but at least the script tries to give her some depth. Vera Farmiga is easily the MVP again. She conveys terror, love, and weariness with subtle nuance. Even when the dialogue is a bit on the nose, she elevates it with emotional sincerity. Without her, the family arc would feel hollow. Both Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga at this point are now absolutely, without a doubt, horror movie veterans, so it's very, very enjoyable, and it's very fortunate that we get to see a final performance from them as these characters one last time, and of course their daughter Judy, which surprisingly has a bit more role in this film. Judy inherits her parents' paranormal sensitivity. She is torn between resenting that burden and fearing she'll repeat their struggles. Her visions tie her to the mirror, making her both asset and liability. Judy finally gets a real presence after being sidelined in the previous film, often getting 2 scenes maximum. The script gives her both inner conflict and external stakes. Still, some moments feel like setup for possible spin-offs rather than fully fleshed out resolutions. Her generational beef with Annabelle is truly entertaining to watch and would have not worked without the context of the previous films. She basically had to grow up with this godforsaken doll, and there's a fun line in the film where one of these kids asks her whether she liked dolls or not, and her face just says it all, man. Absolute definition of show don't tell. The actress Mia Thompson is strong. She injects raw vulnerability into Judy while still making her capable. Her mix of fear and defiance feels believable, making her one of the fresher energies in a tired franchise. There are also characters that doesn't even have a semblance of character development. The Smurl family, though central to the hauntings, are only there to experience the haunting, and they only exist in the film to be the demons' punching bags. There's also Tony, who is the boyfriend of Judy. He doesn't even get fully fleshed out motives, fears, or arcs beyond what's necessary for the plot. There's a backstory about him, but other than that, poof, zero. This reduces the feeling of danger. If you don't care enough about the characters, then the scary stuff costs less. The 2 storylines converge when the Smurl family hauntings draws in the Warrens, especially because of Judy's connection to the mirror and her paranormal sensitivity. You see the personal stakes for both Smurls and the Warrens. In the final act, which in my honest opinion has to be the biggest weakness in this film, there's a confrontation with the demons. Yes, there are 3 of them now. Whoop-de-fucking-do. The more the merrier, as they say. All 3 demons are very shallow. I can't even begin to tell you what their deal was individually. In a franchise that has Bathsheba, Annabelle, and Valak, these 3 bozos are extremely disappointing. If I were to describe them, because the film doesn't even bother to, there's this wife who gets axed to the face, an old lady who only exclusively appears on jump scares, and this Marilyn Manson looking ass motherfucker. Their goal is to get Judy back into the house. The house itself is not haunted, but the mirror in the opening. And their goal is basically to kill her for escaping death during the opening labor scene of the film. The climax ties back to her origins, and the last rite serves as a thematic as well as a narrative closing for the Warrens arc. One major issue I have is the pacing and structural imbalance of this film. The film spends a lot of time setting up the back and forth between the Warrens family stuff and the Smurl hauntings, delays entering the more intense horror territory. Some segments feel like filler or exposition zone. Because of that, tension is diluted. Scares are more predictable when they do come, and the audience is waiting for payoff. As the quote-unquote last film in the franchise, there's an expectation of closure. While the writing does try to wrap up the Warrens arc, some feel the finale doesn't fully deliver in terms of horror-scale threats or original payoffs. It relies more on emotional resolution than pushing out into truly terrifying territory. Also, some of the threads that has been set up could have been more fully explored or given sharper consequences. The resolution sometimes comes with less tension than needed. And of course, one crucial factor in a horror film that makes it worth it. If it's actually scary, which, boy, hooey, it's just not. I'm sorry to tell you this, sports fans, but aside from the jump scare with the demon hands in the restaurant earlier in the film, this is just not scary for me. I'm glad that the rest of the general audience are having their fun, being scared with every jump scares, but in my case, I was just laughing my fucking socks off, man, just giggling and cracking up. And also, at one point, I was just fucking asleep. Yes, I was snoring through the events of the film, which, not for too long because I got to experience the third act, but in any case, it's actually a fucking crime to have a horror movie in theaters to put you to fucking sleep. The main issue about this film lacking scares is because of its predictability and uses of tropes. The haunted mirror, spirits, apparition, freak-outs are all familiar territory by now, and that the movie doesn't do well enough to subvert expectation which I was expecting for a so-called final Conjuring film. You more or less know where things are headed, which is very true for this movie. And with even that, if a movie, especially a horror one, fails to scare me with its jump scares, setup and executions, the least you can do is make me feel afraid for its characters. The extreme lack of stakes drives this movie's ability to produce tension. If I know that none of the main characters are gonna get harmed, then why should I feel afraid? You know? Because they are based on real people, the plot armor are with them through thick and thin. The closest tension I felt that actually made me feel on edge was the death of Father Gordon. Granted, like so many others in this franchise, he kinda lacked depth, but seeing someone who was with this franchise since the first movie killed off was actually quite effective. It's what I would have said, if not for one of my friends who I watched this with, spoiled this sequence for me halfway through Father Gordon's fall. God damn, couldn't just wait, you know? Although it's not the film's fault for me getting spoiled, it was actually my fault for having ears, so... To wrap this thing up, Conjuring The Last Rites has good bones, solid characters at the center, only the main ones. It has its fair share of emotional stakes, thematic ambition about legacy, family, and faith, but the writing is uneven. It has slow setups, predictability, secondary character arcs is underused, and a balance often tips towards drama more than sustained fear. For fans of the franchise, which I'll admit, I've become one, after watching the entire Conjuring catalog in preparation for this film, many will find enough in it to appreciate, especially the emotional parts and callbacks. But for those expecting a finale with relentless tension and genuine shocks, or something that elevates the series rather than just wrapping it up, it may feel a bit underwhelming. Conjuring The Last Rites isn't a bad movie per se. In many ways it does what it intends, reunite beloved horror franchise characters, give fans some emotional beats, provide atmospherics, and deliver a commercially successful entry. For casual horror viewers or fans of the Warrens, there's enough entertainment here to satisfy. But if you were hoping for a bold, boundary-pushing finale, something that redefined the stakes for the franchise or gives us creeps that linger in memory, this might leave you wanting. It leans more on nostalgia and familiarity than innovation. I'd rate this film around a solid 6 out of 10. A little more cheese than chills, a little more talking than terror, but there are enough moments that still work. And with that being said, I think I see you guys around.